Hello everybody, it's Kenneth from the archives here with another video exploring our collections. As we approach Remembrance Day, today I'm going to be looking at the story of some of the sadder items that we hold, specifically records relating to the lives of two men who perished in the Great War, James Braid and George Turner Paton. We're lucky to have the letters of James Braid. There's over 70 letters in the collection, and they cover letters he sent home to his family from when he joined the army in 1914, a few months prior to the First World War, to the very end of his life in 1915. And it gives you a really good idea of what life was like in the army on the eve of the First World War, and for those that first went over to France. Jim Braid was living in Kirkcaldy before he joined the army and wrote regularly to his parents there. He joined the 1st Black Watch, which was of course a regular battalion, and saw active service, and some of the letters describe it, such as this one, where he gives us the vivid impression of a battle, where he describes, "They were throwing bombs at us, there were some of our chaps blown to atoms at this juncture." Really chilling and graphic stuff. The most tragic letter in the collection, however, is not from Jim. It's a letter that was sent to Jim by his parents. And this is a letter that we've often shown to students, and even hardened students find this difficult to read. The first thing to note is the date. It is sent in early October 1915. And Jim's parents are wondering why they haven't heard from him, saying just a few lines, wondering if you are quite well and in good health, and are there anything wrong with you. And you will then see that they realised the regiment was in a battle which is unnamed. Now, if you know the dates, you can probably guess that this was the Battle of Lewes, which started on the 25th of September 1915, and which the Black Watch and many Scottish regiments suffered a horrific loss of life. The tone of this letter is clearly desperate. There's obviously a suspicion that there is something far wrong, and you can almost sense that as they're writing this, his parents are hoping and praying that their worst suspicions are not going to come true. It ends rather tragically, "Right soon, good night." But in fact, Jim was one of those that had lost his life on the 25th of September in that terrible battle. His parents received confirmation of that in this letter, written by another private, David Valence, which he sent on the 2nd of October, a week after the battle. He describes Jim as one of his best chums. Obviously, where the battle was is censored out, and he describes his death as being shot through the left lung just as he mounted the 2nd German parapet, and died almost immediately. We have to treat this with a note of caution. For one thing, in a battle, would you be able to identify that somebody had been shot in the left lung? I've also heard people with more medical knowledge than I do suggest that if you had been shot in the left lung, it would not have been a quick and instantaneous death. We also know James Braid's body was never found. So is this a sanitised version that's been sent home to try and make things better for his parents? We don't know, but the story gets even sadder. Because Jim's parents were desperate to find out more, so wrote back to Private Valence, whom they clearly didn't know. It was obviously somebody Jim had met through the army. But very sadly, they then received the letter they sent back with marked deceased, because Private Valence himself had died a few days after he sent that letter. And these letters really give us an idea of the tragic toll of the First World War. Another collection that gives us a personal insight into the losses of the First World War is the papers of the Paton and Dingwall families. And in these we have the records of George Turner Paton. Now, George was born in Dundee. He joined the Navy at a relatively young age of 15 in 1902 and served there with distinction for many years. In 1913, he married Mary, his wife, and obviously he was soon off to war a year after that. During the war, one of the ships he served on was HMS Mary Rose. Tragically, that ship was sunk on the 17th of October 1917, 70 miles off Shetland, in an action with German cruisers, and most of the crew, including George, lost their lives. So we have this contrast, this jolly photograph of him and his crewmates, with the press cuttings of his death and the telegram that his family received. We also hold the official scroll that was issued in the name of the King to all those who had lost their life in the war, with his name on it, and the famous memorial plaques known as the Dead Man's Penny that were issued to the next of kin of people that had perished in action. George's story is particularly tragic. He left behind his son Bertie, who'd only been born in 1916, and his wife was pregnant, and the following year gave birth to his posthumous daughter, who was appropriately named Mary Rose Paton. So that's the records that we're looking at today. Obviously a sad story, but at this time of year it's appropriate to remember the loss of life that has happened due to war. And we're lucky that we have these records which are able to give us a personal connection to these individuals and allow their names to still be remembered to this day. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and stay safe.